Strange things exist in this world. A massive orc slams its bat against a knight's shield. Their appearance is bizarre, striking fear into those who can see them. As the orc is preoccupied fighting the knight named Ron, another warrior uses a bow and arrow against the monster. Two other warriors appear and they now use magic against the creature. The humans call them monsters. The warrior praises them for their good work and checks if they have any injuries. The other two confirm that they have no injuries from the fight and are safe. The girl named Miki is thrilled when she discovers that she leveled up. The warrior then looks at Ron and thanks the vanguard for doing well again in subjugating a monster. However, they are horrified upon seeing the man grab the giant's finger and unsheath his blade. He then starts slowly removing the hair from the orc's limbs. Next, he drains the blood and simmers it slowly with spices to remove the stench, cuts the finished meat into bite-sized pieces, and stir-fries it with noodles. His party watches as he tosses the meal and cooks it to perfection. They can never get used to watching him cook monsters. Another thing is, they have decent food so they can't understand why he insists on eating gruesome monsters. One of his party members, Heka, takes a bite of her own sandwich and states that the world is a big place and there are other kinds of people existing. Besides, Ron does his best to make it taste good. The knight then finally adds a little garnish. With a little touch of love, he finishes cooking the orc cream pasta, but his teammates have looks of disgust on their faces. He opens his mouth and devours the pasta. One of them asks if it is really tasty, and he confirms, offering a bite to Mickey. He sighs after taking a bite again, really satisfied with his meal. They keep on judging him because they don't know how good the monsters taste. The orc cream pasta's delectable taste bursts inside his mouth, and he savors every juice of the orc's limb meat. The texture of the savory collagen is so soft that it melts away inside his mouth. Meanwhile, his three teammates still find it odd that he has such a blissful look on his face every time he eats orcs. They then talk about the hero who went missing a while back, and according to rumors, they have already found the corpse. The girl is shocked about the news, even more so when she hears that it happened in the southern Tierson forest. She finds it odd since she just passed near there on her way back the other day. The hero must have encountered a strong monster to be defeated. Thinking that his caliber is no match, they then direct their attention to Ron and ask him why he started eating monsters in the first place. The knight stops eating and starts recalling the past. 3 months ago, in a small village in the south, the passengers were having a dilemma about the carriages suddenly stopping. They were not prepared since everything was departing normally just yesterday. The boss told them that there was a reported sighting of a red boar rampaging on the road. He then urged them to take a look at the carriage that pushed to travel yesterday. It was a wreck, and it was truly fortunate that they weren't killed. So, he wouldn't risk traveling the carriage on the road for now. The passengers all sighed helplessly that they couldn't travel because of the sudden appearance of the red boar. They expressed dismay that they couldn't see their loved ones because of the delay. One of the caretakers was worried that they were stopping transporting people for the trade run. There were only 3 days left until the delivery deadline for the noble. The boss gripped his head in annoyance about the possible late shipment of the noble's delivery. Just then, they overheard a carriage driver declining another traveler who needed a ride to the city. Seeing that he seemed strong, the caretaker approached him and told him that they were bound to the city and just waiting for as many fellow travelers as possible before their noon departure, so he would be waiting for a bit. Desperate for a ride, Ron chose to patiently wait inside the carriage. The man introduced himself as Maham, a peddler, and Ron introduced himself as well. Maham went back to his boss and reported that something felt odd about the knight, thinking if he was a deserter. The boss didn't actually care as long as he looked like he could fight monsters. They didn't have enough time and resources to gather mercenaries, so someone like him would be perfect to trap and fight the red boar. Meanwhile, Ron fell asleep while waiting inside the carriage. In his dream, the hero died a gruesome death. A man saw the corpse and staggered back in shock. As he looked behind him, he saw giant insects ready to devour him. Fear started to consume him while he desperately clung to life. He told himself he was going to make it out alive and get back to Adorama. Just then, Ron felt someone waking him up from his deep slumber. It was Maham who told him that the carriage was already on its route, and he was asking everyone where they were headed. One of the travelers told them that he was going to Helm, while the others were going to Adorama like Ron. When asked where he was specifically going, he answered that he was going to a nursery to see his family. It had been quite some time since he returned, so he was in a hurry to go back. A traveler commented that he looked strong and asked for his level. Since Ron seemed confused, he explained further that it was a number that let someone see and measure their own strength through what they called the window of the mind. The man then boasted that he was on level 23. He shared further what efforts he exerted to reach that level while Ron was checking his own system. However, before they could even check his level, the carriage suddenly came to a halt, and they began to be unsteady. They all announced that it was the red boar which lunged in their direction. The travelers tried to lure it away from the carriage but realized that it was too late since it was already in front of them. Ron kept his cool and didn't even flinch at the sight of the monster. He appraised the monster and learned that it was already in level 65. Since it might be the right opponent for a test, he unsheathed his sword and rushed in the boar's direction. The traveler earlier warned him that it would be dangerous and not to attack alone unless he had a death wish. However, Ron didn't listen and faced the monster head-on, slashing his sword against the red boar in a swift move. The monster was split in half, much to the surprise of everyone. Ron is surprised that he was able to defeat the red boar despite their level gap. He didn't think he could deal that much damage to such a massive monster. The traveler taps him on the back, commending him for slicing a red boar clean in half with one swing. He observes that Ron sounds so young based on his voice, but it turns out he shouldn't have underestimated him from the start. He then asks if the knight is an elf, a beast, or a human. As he is about to answer, his stomach growls from hunger. The man then invites him to have dinner. Later that night, while the travelers are busy preparing dinner, they talk about Ron and how he always hides his face. They analyze his gear and notice that it looks cheap, so they suspect that his old sword might actually be a legendary treasure. Curious, they try to ask him about his sword, but he is suddenly nowhere to be found. Just then, they are shocked when he returns, dragging the dead red boar on his back. Miki is in disbelief as she watches him drag the corpse to the dining area. They reprimand him for almost making them lose their appetite. Miki heartily takes a spoonful of her food, savoring every flavor. Ron takes a bite of his own food but finds it oddly awful. She explains that their food can already be considered decent for their situation. Realizing that he still wants to eat the dead monster, she tells him that it's awful and possibly poisonous, and that they just need to get the necessary materials and burn it as much as possible. She emphasizes that starving is better than eating such hideous monsters. She then encourages him to eat since they still have a long journey to Adorama. The other travelers get her attention, saying that the corpse won't catch fire. She approaches them and inspects the body. Ron wonders why they're asking help from an archer like her to burn the corpse. Just then, she places her hand over the body and lights it on fire. The travelers are impressed by her magic and wish they could learn it so things would be easier for them. Ron then asks if she is someone from the magic tower, and she shakes her head, saying that one doesn't necessarily have to become a mage to perform simple magic. However, to Ron, learning basic magic takes at least 3 years, so he assumes she must already be gifted. She clarifies that basic magic is standard for adventurers, and he sounds like he came from an old era. She says he seems so out of touch that it's almost as if he lived in a secluded area for a long time. She then points to the city lights, which shock Ron since the city now uses magic stones instead of lamps. She questions why he hasn't seen one before, but concludes it's because he came from the countryside. She further explains that even children's toys now run on magic, so it's nothing special. Ron realizes that time really has changed because when he was little, they didn't have things like that. Later, he overhears the travelers talking about meat and how they would love to feast on it and pair it with cold beer. The next morning in eastern Adorama, the travelers thank Ron for defeating the red boar, which allowed them to arrive earlier than planned. They say they wouldn't have known what to do if they were delayed, so they thank him profusely. Ron thanks them as well, but he is low on energy after not eating for days. He tried to eat some food to survive his hunger, but threw up everything he forced into his mouth, ending up drinking only water. The people traveling with him initially thought he was just a picky eater but now suspect that he has some kind of illness. This also explains why he never took off his helmet, and they just hope they won't contract the same illness. The caretaker of the carriage gives him something to show gratitude. He tries to decline, but the man insists, so he accepts a bag of potatoes. However, he drops it on the ground and throws it away since he can't stomach normal food. He then focuses his energy on navigating his old hometown. A lot has changed, making it feel almost unfamiliar. Suddenly, he sees a familiar bakery, still bustling with many people. It brings him comfort, since the next block should be his home, the Ria's nursery. However, to his confusion, instead of a nursery, there is now a toy store he has never seen before. The shopkeeper asks if he's looking for something. Ron explains that the location should be the Ria's nursery and asks where they relocated, but the man says he has never heard of such a place and that he is already the second owner of the shop. Ron insists that it was the original location of the nursery. Just then, an old man calls his attention and tells him that he didn't see it himself, but he heard about that place long ago. He heard it was burned down many years ago during a dragon attack. A man is slowly descending into the deep abyss, drowning. He had an unremarkable life where everything seemed dull and colorless, with no real dreams or precious memories. And as he continued to sink deeper into the sea, the only precious memory that stayed with him was the warmth of a dinner table surrounded by the family who had gone before him. When he woke up, he saw an unfamiliar ceiling and surroundings. He then laid his eyes on two boys who were thrilled to see that he was finally awake. One of them called out and yelled that the baby was already awake. He was confused since his last memory was the accident, and now there were kids around him. Just then, another voice appeared, gently reminding the kids not to yell around the baby. He then felt that he was being picked up and came face to face with a nun who had a kind smile. She welcomed him to the St. Rias nursery, saying that from now on, he was part of their family. That was his first memory of the new world, and it carried the warmth of the family he never thought he could feel again. Years later, he had grown into a man who helped run the nursery. Coming from a hard day's work, he dropped the gold coins he had just earned. Coughing and obviously frail, the nun expressed worry about him always working. He replied that he just wanted the children to eat something tasty. However, the nun wanted him to rest for a bit because it seemed like he was really pushing himself too hard lately. He assured her that he was fine and promised her that his job this time was easy. He was tasked to clear out a goblin horde to the south. Seeing him so determined, the nun let him leave but made him promise that he would go home before it got too late because she would bake him his favorite berry pie. He smiled at her and promised that he would come home and join dinner. Later, Ron is looking at a grave. A nun explains that most of the buildings were reconstructed after the dragon's attack, but unfortunately, there were no survivors from the nursery, and the temple has taken over its role now. She seems puzzled by his presence since no one has visited the grave for so long, and asks how he is related to the dead. However, Ron fails to answer her and collapses to the ground in grief. He reaches the grave and remembers the promise he made to the nun. If only he had been there, would it have made a difference? If he had fulfilled his promise of going home early, would he have been able to save them? The rain suddenly pours, mirroring the storm in his heart. He is now forever changed, and he would never know the answer to his what-ifs. Meanwhile, the nuns from the temple are starting to get worried about him. It has been days since he left the temple, and they worry that he might get sick if he continues to grieve under the bad weather. Since he hasn't eaten anything, they left him food. He grabs the bread and takes a bite but finds it really disgusting. Losing his appetite, he tosses the bread away upon realizing that he can't eat anything since everything tastes so awful. He remembers how everyone can eat just fine, while he struggles to taste and digest everything he eats. He is starting to think that something must have gone wrong with him since he can't even satisfy his hunger. Lonely and desperate, he starts to wallow in depression. He lost his family again and is now living a miserable life. When everything feels bleak, he smells a delicious aroma of food, and he starts salivating at just the idea of meat in his mouth. Hungry, he follows the smell and finds two guards burning a monster's flesh to hide it. They worry about getting fined if someone catches them burning monster corpses inside the castle walls. One of them assures the other that they won't get caught because, surprisingly, the aroma of the burned monster corpse smells like real meat. They would be in real trouble, though, if someone found the meat and ate it thinking it was real. One of the guards states that the monster meat isn't poisonous at all, so they would be fine, and it will be a real hassle to dump the monster flesh outside the castle, so they must burn it now. Meanwhile, Ron finds the monster meat looking so delicious. To satisfy his hunger, he sneaks a piece of the meat. One of the guards wonders why the monster meat seems to have reduced, not knowing that Ron stole it. Back at the grave, Ron takes a bite of the monster meat and immediately finds it truly delicious. The flavor is beyond anything he has ever savored, and it is driving him insane. He takes bite after bite, and the taste is incomparable to the meals people forced on him while traveling. This meat finally satisfies his hunger. Just then, he accidentally bites his hand since he is so immersed in devouring the meat non-stop. His hand gets injured, prompting him to sob uncontrollably. His suppressed emotions finally catch up to him, and he apologizes to his family in between his cries. He feels lonely without them but wants to live like a normal human being. He wants to eat more delicious food and live happily without feeling any guilt. As he continues to kneel before the grave, he feels the lightest touch holding his hand. When he glances up, he sees a leaf falling onto his hand where he felt it. He then looks up at the grave as if understanding that his family is giving him a sign that it is time for him to let go of the past and live his life. He then takes his leave and promises that this time, he will be home early and won't be late. There is a tower standing tall in the middle of Adorama City. The adventurers call it Hexalem. The guild helps all adventurers reach their dreams, and it is a universally recognized institution. Housing many talented adventurers, they can handle all requests from dungeon exploration to subjugation, and they can systematically manage and operate registered adventurers. However, since it is now a well-known establishment, not everyone can just register anymore. Adventurers are showing their best to be part of the guild, punching a robot to measure their strength. Some passed and some failed, but then a man in a hoodie gives the robot another blow and surprisingly sets the new record for that day's score. The man turns out to be an elf named Dahlia, and people are in awe of just how strong he is. Because of this, another adventurer approaches and congratulates him. The man even offers to team up with him, claiming that he used to be pretty famous back in the day, and that they could easily make it to A rank if they team up together. Dahlia bursts out, telling the man not to touch him so casually. At the same time, Ron passes by and apologizes, thinking that he was the one who offended him. The proctor asks why he didn't take the test. He is frustrated with him and reprimands him for taking the test so lightly. Ron apologizes, saying he didn't take it lightly and asks to take the test. Seeing a fellow adventurer having a hard time, the elf lightly taps him on the back, advising that if he is tense, he won't be able to perform his best. Ron thanks him for his kind words, and the elf smiles, saying that compatriots have to help each other out. The elf then approaches the receptionist, Daisy. She praises him for getting first place in the guild test and gives him his certification for being an official Hexalum adventurer. He gets the certificate and can't believe that he only gets a D rank after placing first in the exam. She explains that by regulation, ranks above D require completed request records and assures him that with his skills, he will rank up in no time. With this, he decides to get started right away and requests a quest that he can take immediately. Daisy finds that there are 2 D rank requests perfect for him. The first one is the regular subjugation request in Gargoyle Manor, and the other is the Gremlin Eyeball procurement, which also spawns in Gargoyle Manor. He decides to take both quests. However, Daisy realizes too late that both quests only accept parties. Seeing his confusion, she explains that Gargoyle Manor is a dungeon that hasn't been cleared by adventurers in a long time, and so the monster population inside drastically increased. This could pose a potential dungeon rampage, and D ranks must form parties before entering. He looks around and finds it impossible to form parties with adventurers who look like losers. He is about to request again to go alone for the quest, but out of nowhere, the side of the guild where they are suddenly explodes, and when the dust settles, they see the training robot broken and trashed. Dahlia wonders what happened, thinking that it must be impossible to lift since it weighs as much as a bull. Ron is as surprised as they are by the display of his immense strength. He didn't expect that he would be able to exert such force in just a single blow. He apologizes to the receptionist, who forgives him since it was an honest mistake on his part, and luckily no one got hurt. As long as he pays for the damages, there will be no problem. They will have to rebuild the broken wall and furniture and fix the golem. Additionally, he will also have to take responsibility for the business interruption of the guild. With this, he has to pay 2 gold and 30 silver coins to clear out the trouble he accumulated because of his strength test. However, he has nothing right now but crumbs of despair, and so he has to work for the amount he has to pay. Obviously annoyed, Daisy tries her hardest to smile and tells him that he can pay whenever he is ready, but he has to pay it as soon as possible, or else the guild will have to sue him. There are quests he can take on, but this will require him to join a party. Hearing this, Dahlia takes the opportunity and offers to team up with him since he is looking for someone to form a party with to do the requests. He emphasizes that in times like these, they have to help each other since they are compatriots after all. Ron doubts his intention, thinking he might have ulterior motives. He then uses his appraisal skill on him and discovers that he is level 36 and an archer who is also a spirit user. Knowing his capabilities, he quietly questions why the elf wants to team up with him. He doesn't understand why the elf is so friendly with him. Daisy is thrilled that the two will go on a quest together since their classes are very compatible. They are an ideal combination since Ron is a warrior and Dahlia is an archer. Meanwhile, Ron is still doubtful about their partnership and wants to avoid parties if possible. Since they haven't introduced themselves properly, Dahlia extends his hand and introduces himself, wishing that their first quest will be successful. Ron reaches for his hand and decides that this might be beneficial for now. Since they both agree to the terms and accept their partnership, it is officially established that Elf Dahlia and Human Ron will do the quests together. However, to his surprise, Dahlia takes a step back and has a disgusted look on his face upon hearing that he is human. While on their quest in the Gargoyle Dungeon, Dahlia can't hide his contempt for his partner. He didn't expect him to be human, and yet he can't break their partnership since it was already sealed. He finds the human species vulgar and inferior to them. Meanwhile, Ron contemplates the history of the elves. They live longer than humans and look more mysterious and alluring. However, there was a time when they were enslaved by humans, and no wonder some of them still feel rage knowing their past. Fortunately, the guild receptionist didn't act like she was disgusted by humans, but clearly, Dahlia is different. He follows him inside the dungeon and is stunned by how large it is. It looks like an abandoned mansion inside and is very different from its vibe outside. He then uses his appraisal skill to check the information and level of the monsters they are about to subjugate. The gremlins swarm around the mansion. They are usually low-tier beasts, but when they grow, they become a bigger problem to solve since they will be harder to defeat. Dahlia still treats him with contempt, saying that he should back off, so he won't interfere with his completion of the quest. They should just deal with it separately since he can't stomach working with a human. Agreeing with him, Ron begins to leave and go about his business. The elf finds this offensive since he just ignored him and went on his way, noting that basic manners don't come naturally for short-lived humans like him. Ron mentions that he is over 100 years old, and this confuses the elf. However, he chooses not to clarify his situation and agrees with Dahlia's initial suggestion not to get in each other's way. He then proceeds to where the gremlins swarm. Surprised by his action, the elf calls him reckless for jumping into the quest with no preparation at all. He states that their opponents are only at level 18 and that with their level, they don't need much preparation. Dahlia is shocked that Ron could actually see stats and wonders if the man peeked at his too. He then realizes that if his partner can easily see stats, then that means he could possibly be stronger than him. This idea drives him insane and makes him angrier at the man, accusing him of looking into his details without his permission. He continues to berate Ron, calling him rude and disgusting for stealing his information and playing with his privacy. However, he doesn't notice that a gremlin has already stalked them. As it is about to attack, Ron swiftly unsheathes his sword and slashes the monster in half in front of a very shocked Dahlia. He tells him that he should keep his tone down when inside a dungeon so they won't get noticed easily. He also confesses that he checked the elf's stats earlier when they greeted each other at the guild. With no other choice, he suggests that if they want to do things separately as soon as possible, they must finish the work early so they can go on with their separate ways, and tells him that he must not hold him back. Frustrated by his arrogance, the elf agrees, saying that he must not hold him back as well. They then agree to separately exterminate the gargoyle and the gremlins. Later, Ron successfully slays 50 gremlins and is satisfied with the eyeballs he collected. However, on the other side of the mansion waits the gargoyle, which is the higher form of the gremlin, and its entire body is like hardened stone. Dahlia takes on 2 gargoyles at the same time. He is obviously having a hard time, but Ron refuses to help him, thinking that the elf can handle himself. For the time being, he decides to grab something to eat. He contemplates how he will cook the remains of the gremlin. Since it kind of looks like a frog, he decides to cook it like a frog. Surprisingly, the gremlin's meat doesn't have enough edible parts, so he makes a small batch and turns it into skewers. To make the most of it, he decides to grill the meat and the innards. Ultimately, he creates gremlin skewers. After admiring his work, he takes a bite of the skewer and finds it really delicious. If he has to compare it, the meat tastes more like duck than chicken. It is a bit spicy and has a gamey but rich flavor. He thinks it would be even better if he put sauce over it. Suddenly, his system detects that he has been poisoned as he falls to the ground, paralyzed. He can't move his body, and he continues to twitch on the ground. He realizes that the bitter aftertaste was the poison. Slowly dying, he thinks of a way to get an antidote, but since gremlins don't use poison to attack, he realizes that they must neutralize their own poison using their own body. With this analogy, he grabs the gremlin's liver and uses it as his antidote. He then takes a bite, hoping it will work. Luckily, he then successfully neutralizes the poison. He sighs and is thankful that he survived the ordeal. He realized that people don't eat monsters because they are poisonous, and that he needs to study antidotes more to combat this kind of problem from making monsters his meal. Just then, Dahlia finds him and is incredulous to see that he is eating monsters. He has long since known that humans are barbaric, but he never imagined that humans could do this level of primitive thing. Ron replies that he shouldn't judge those who eat meat just because elves are vegetarians. Dahlia barks at him, saying that it wasn't just a difference in their culture but a whole issue of him being a gruesome and disgusting being. He just wants to go back to the world tree and refresh his mind. He then asks if he has finished his quest to get the gremlin's eyeball, pushing him to go ahead so they can go their separate ways. However, Ron tells him that they accepted the request on the condition that they formed a 2-man party. If they split and something happens, the guild will be responsible for the mishap, and that will also include Daisy. He then suggests that he help with the hunt of the gargoyles so they can end the quest as soon as possible. Dahlia refuses help, but it is too late as Ron raises his cooking pan and taps his sword onto it, creating a loud noise that draws the surrounding monsters to their location. He declares that he used to be a shielder, and this confuses the elf. He can use the most widely recognized skill, the taunt. As a shielder, he can draw nearby monsters and protect the party. Seeing a swarm of monsters coming their way, the elf immediately runs to safety while Ron stands in their way, looking determined. The taunt skill is normally used to defend teammates, but it also works well for luring flying monsters. But he notices that the skill is more potent now than before. As the monsters gather his way, he activates his swordsmanship skill and uses martial arts to increase his agility in close-quarter combat. From a distance, Dahlia watches as the monsters swarm around his partner. He plans to keep his distance for now and support with his arrows. But to his surprise, in just one slash, Ron is able to defeat the swarm of monsters. He is in disbelief since he had a hard time hunting 5 gargoyles by himself. Outside, he runs after Ron and asks if he is really okay with canceling the party request. The knight agrees and reminds him that he was the one who wanted the request to be over quickly, and reiterates that he only helped because he wanted their quest to be done quickly. Just then, Dahlia's super hearing suddenly activates and he hears voices from a distance. He runs to a nearby cliff and sees a carriage carrying elven slaves. He witnesses one of the elves being punished for moving slowly. The elf begs not to be hit again, his body already full of injuries. Full of rage, Dahlia barks at him, saying that he despises humans and that they trafficked his race to make them slaves. He tells him to draw his weapons so they can make them suffer. However, Ron refuses to be part of his revenge. He reasons that the elf slave might not be illegal at all. He could be paying off debt or could be a criminal. The elf replies that he clearly heard them talking about selling off the animals at the black market. Ron urges him to report it to the guards instead and starts to walk away, not wanting to waste his time on something that isn't a request. Disappointed, Dahlia resolves to do the rescuing by himself. He thought the guy was different, but he is like everyone else. While walking away, he smells something that his nose finds familiar. Meanwhile, a mother and daughter are inside a carriage hugging each other as they brace for more punishment. Unable to resist helping his kin, the elf pushes himself to do it since he has trained his whole life to help his kin and end their slavery and suffering. He draws his arrow ready to strike the carriage, but to his surprise, a massive explosion shakes everyone, including the traders below. A sword was thrown at the carriage to distract everyone. Dahlia is in disbelief and asks Ron why he helped when he decided not to earlier. The knight tells him that he doesn't meddle with adults' problems, but it is a different story if children are involved since they are innocent. The thugs stared at the carriage, confused as to where the sword suddenly came from. When they look up, they see the 2 men who were attacking from above. Watching them slide down from the cliff, they're asked who they think they are, and if they realize the consequences of their actions. Dahlia was enraged by the disgusting humans, saying he's well aware of the elves in the carriage. However, the men insist that they're licensed traders from Beshtal, meaning the slaves are all legal. The elf's eyes open in shock upon hearing the name of the Marquis's house. It's doubtful at first, but the house crest was indeed on the cart they just attacked. One then scoffs at the elf, saying those holed up in forests are idiots who cause trouble. The insult strikes a nerve as intended, but before he could do anything, Ron notices something odd. The crest being displayed wasn't the Beshtal crest, at least not the authentic one. Describing what it's supposed to look like, the slavers urgently tried to silence the warrior. While the wolf's eyes look normal, the Beshtal ancestor only had one eye, which is a feature reflected in the family insignia. In other words, the crest they have, which has both eyes, is a drawn fake. Caught committing a crime red-handed, the men share hesitant but knowing looks among each other. According to the law, the punishment for impersonating nobility is death. Pushed to a corner, the slavers' mercenaries are told to kill the adventurers. In the old days, it was considered etiquette for mercenaries to avoid fighting each other. As things have seemingly changed since then, Ron pulls his hand back and releases his power to drive it into the enemy's gut. He nearly dies from one hit and is sent flying far away. Everyone is shocked as the big and burly guy crashes into the ground, forced unconscious with just a single strike. Just then, something sharp flew past one of the slavers, cutting through his cheek. He cursed them as he fell to the ground, trembling in fear. With a notched arrow aimed at his head, he's asked if he still wants to fight. Night falls soon enough, and words of gratitude are said inside a cozy tavern. Dahlia says he just did what anyone would do, unable to ignore seeing his own people enslaved. Returning to Ron after settling the matter, he apologizes for taking so long. The illegal traders were handed over to authorities, and it seems there are even more victims. They're sure to serve a hefty punishment since they even impersonated nobles. As the human was about to turn away, a light voice called to him. The elf child looked at him, asking if he's the uncle who saved them all. Beaming with respect, she calls him cool and thanks him for helping them out. With all that said, she waves goodbye and leaves with her family. Ron is silent and does not answer, but Dahlia then says something he never expected to, unable to look him in the eye. Although hates to admit it, the human helped him save his kin, which is more than worthy of thanks. However, the warrior just flatly asks him for money. If he's so grateful, then the best way to show that is with money. His help wasn't exactly meant to earn money, but in the end, money is more reliable than words. Dahlia shook from frustration, regretting that he even felt thankful in the first place. He throws a pouch of coins at him and tells his temporary comrade to get lost. Infuriated by the money-grubbing human, he storms off with a vow to never trust them again. Ron heads to the guild the next day. Daisy confirms that he brought the exact amount of items he was told to, and brightly congratulates him for completing his first job request. It was a tough one for a first mission, but he handled it perfectly and with amazing time. He's given the payment for his speedy success, but it's just 2 meager coins on his palm. Feeling like it's become much less than before, he says it feels a little short. According to the guild rules, his debt for the broken equipment will be deducted with each job reward. Surprisingly fearful of the receptionist, he promises to pay it off as fast as possible. In other words, he just has to go out and grab another request to earn more money. Spending some time in the guild's bulletin board, he looks at the job postings. The end goal is his finances, but Ron wants to try eating something different this time. One request he can take on is in the Stas dungeon, but he avoids it as it only ever has stone monsters. Another is a regular extermination request at an orc hut, which he's never gone to before. Thinking about orc meat and the dishes he can make, he wonders if it's similar to pork. Just then, a familiar voice called to him. Miki asked what a mercenary was doing there, and asked if he became an adventurer. She thought he died after they separated, since he didn't eat anything while they were together. Distracted by the catch-up, she turns and introduces him to her party members. A young man named Olga is the party leader, who's already heard about Ron, including his picky eating and insane strength. The head is an archer like her, and Heka, their mage, completes their party of 3. 2 archers and a mage don't spell a perfect composition, so they're asked about their frontliner. They usually hire one, but have struggled with this recently, stopping them from entering the dungeon. With that said, Miki reaches her hand out and asks the warrior to join their party in heading to the orc hut. Ron is surprised by the unexpected opportunity. An orc rampaged in the forest, forcing Miki to dive away from its huge club. Fortunately, an arrow sped towards its eye before it could attack again. It wails in pain from Olga's precise hit, which is supplemented by an explosion from the lodged projectile. With amazing teamwork, they're able to bring another enemy down. They were completely in sync that day and had already defeated 2 targets. Things had been going well ever since Ron joined their party. However, it seems they spoke too soon as the ground beneath them suddenly began trembling. From a short distance, they see a bunch of orcs charging right at them. It seems that the horde was attracted by the cries of their kin that were just killed. The party immediately turns tail and runs away for now, but Heka trips and falls to the ground. She was about to be killed by the merciless swing of the monster, and all they could do was stare in horror while it happened. Just then, the orc in front of her was cut cleanly in half. The others soon followed, all decimated by the swing of Ron's unyielding blade. While checking on the mage, the other members stared in awe of the warrior's strength. Seeing him stand in the middle of the monster corpses, they wonder just how strong he is. Later on, several arrows pierced and killed another orc. They've used their bows enough to defeat 10 targets, so it was time to call it a day. Gathered around the campfire, the others wonder what level Ron is for him to have such power. Reminded of her savior, Heka turns to thank him, but doesn't see the comrade anywhere. Just then, her nose moved as a delicious scent wafted through the air. It smells like roasting meat, which is unlikely to happen in the middle of a dungeon. They find the new member, sitting around a campfire all by himself. Realizing that he's the one grilling the meat, Miki gives a few tips and offers to cook together. However, she freezes upon seeing the processed orc carcass, laid out and sitting on the fire. The sight shocks them, and they can't understand why he would even do such a thing. On the pan, he had a couple of delectable-looking grilled orc thighs. He thought it might be similar to pork, but it's closer to a mixture of cow and pig meat. Wondering which it tastes closer to, he takes a big bite off of one, and is amazed by how delicious it is. With every chew, rich juices burst out, letting him taste the meat's true well-cooked flavor. It's closer to pork, and is packed with umami. His comrades retch and try to stop him from eating the monster, but he remains unfazed and instead sprinkles some salt and pepper while grilling the other piece. It was impossible for it to not taste delicious. The simple seasoning created a great aroma, and it'd be perfect with a few vegetables. Meanwhile, the sight of him enjoying the monster was a nightmare to the others. Ron watches the 3 adventurers gather and talk about his behavior, and he already knew what was happening. That said, he's glad to have tasted the orc meat. To his surprise, Olga put an understanding hand on his shoulder. They won't pretend to understand his taste, so they'll just ask him to not eat monsters so openly. It isn't right for them to kick a skilled adventurer out, just because his preferences differ from theirs. He's even offered their food as well, but with his firm rejection, the party heads to bed. The next day comes, and they resume their hunt for orcs. Despite the towering beast's heavy and continuous attacks, Ron blocked everything with his shield, allowing his comrades to unleash their attacks at the enemy. Their day goes on like this and ends with the humans' routine monster meals that disgusted the others. Nonetheless, the party was able to laugh and chat around the light of the campfire. Soon enough, it was the last day of the quest, but the newcomer still insisted on sleeping alone. Miki was intrigued, but Olga just volunteered to take the first watch. With this, the calming sound of the fire lulled them to sleep. Ron dreamed as usual and recalled a faint memory that was similar to how his recent nights have been. With the fire already going, they called him over to join them already. Her voice was inaudible, but he sees the smiling face of a familiar woman. Just then, he's forced to wake up by the sound of his name being screamed. Opening his eyes, he sees his current party members, standing over him with disdainful eyes. He wonders why everyone was awake, when it wasn't even his turn to stand watch. They aim their weapons at him and tell him not to move. The incantation was already complete, and one move will have his head flying away. While he was sleeping, they used an appraisal stone on him out of curiosity over his strength. However, they were shocked to see a horrifying detail on his status. Under all his titles was one calling him the Kinslayer. He had been caught. Kinslayer is a title granted to cold-blooded individuals who've killed over 100 members of their own race. It increases attack power when combating members of their species. This means Ron has killed more than 100 humans, and it's something they can't overlook. He must not have a criminal record since he's a member of the guild, but this was still unacceptable. They ask him to explain his situation, hoping he can clear the misunderstanding up. However, the warrior remains silent. Did he approach them, hoping to take their lives and add it to his tally? The shady man just apologizes without explaining. His circumstances are unknown, but this isn't something they can turn a blind eye to. Olga can't trust someone who has a history of murder, so he kicks him out of the party. With the decision final and irrevocable, Ron simply stood up, already used to this routine. He takes his bag and leaves without another word. 100 years ago, in the southern Tierson forest, a goblin charged at a bunch of adventurers. They were responding to a tank's taunt ability, falling for the bait that leaves them open to the archer lying in wait. Arrows hit their marks perfectly, and the monsters are taken down in an instant. The leader commends everyone's teamwork and checks for any injury. She praises the archer who shot 2 down at once, but the adventurer insists that she's too kind. Since they have 18 more to go, the party agrees to keep their spirits up. Turning to Ron, who they called Charlotte, the leader asks if he's finished organizing the subjugation certificates, to which he urgently nods his head and recommends moving out. Moving forward, they make some small talk and note that there are fewer goblins than expected. It's probably because they're still by the entrance, and they should be more deep in the forest. While they continued to talk about the mission, Ron noticed something odd. Thinking they couldn't hear his voice, he reached out to hold them, but his party members all turned with deadly glares. Piercing through him, they asked why he would do such a thing, and why he survived while each and every one of them died. The warrior jolted up from the nightmare. He was on his bed, panting from the vivid dream that was more like a memory. It was a beautiful morning outside, so he got up and went to the guild as usual, but something was different. As soon as he stepped in, murmurs spread across the room, identifying him as the one from the rumors. Someone speaks a little loudly, and calls him a murderer who joins weak parties to extort money. Groundless and exaggerated rumors have spread in the days he was resting. Not willing to engage with them, he heads to Daisy, who says she has wonderful news. Given his achievements, he's been promoted to C rank, and has received a special request, told to slay a harpy. He thinks about the golden shine of crispy fried chicken. Just then, he hears a familiar voice calling him a man blinded with greed. Dahlia smiled at the old acquaintance he hasn't seen in a while. Ron just accepts the C rank request, while the elf goes on about the rumors surrounding him. Ignored, he says they came all the way there, since he's hated by humans. A pair of red and furry ears perked up, and a girl asks if this is the person the elf has been talking about. A striking girl with soft features appeared. Apparently, she's the leader of the party Dahlia recently joined. She brightly greeted him, introducing herself as Marin and saying she's heard a lot about him. Judging by her appearance alone, she looks like a beastman that focuses on martial arts. Using appraisal, Ron takes a look at her status to confirm his guesses. Her strength is as high as expected, but he's surprised by the class listed under her name. She proudly calls herself a priest, which she strangely believes is obvious enough. Priest is a support class that plays a key role in healing, but she's as far from holy as one can look. Dahlia was looking for a party of non-human races, and happened to find her party. Only the 2 of them are members, but since he heard the rumors surrounding Ron, he suggested that recruiting a strong kinslayer like him won't be so bad. He was still struggling to understand what was happening, so the elf has to spell it out for him. Reaching out, they invite the man who's killed hundreds of humans to join their party. It isn't really an invitation someone would accept, but does he really have another choice? The room was already filled with distaste against him, and finding another party with the kinslayer rumors would be impossible. Left with no choice, they shake hands and look forward to a fruitful partnership. Now, it's time to head out and test the compatibility of their strength and abilities. There was no other place to go but to the dungeon, where they'll also be hunting the harpy. Under the faint glow of dungeon caves, harpies screeched and charged at the adventurers. For now, Ron is instructed to take them down and prove his skills. Flying monsters such as these are tricky for a shield bearer to handle, but he should be able to reach them if he jumps up. To his surprise, the monsters fall with the aid of the party's archer. Dahlia says he can't let humans steal his targets again, and tells him to just keep taunting. Another enemy dove in with a loud roar. Ron turns as he's urgently and suddenly told to put his shield up, but not to defend. Marin dashed toward him and used his shield as a platform to launch herself at one of the enemies. Despite her priest class, a single punch from the beast woman is enough to take it out. The leader commends the new recruit, praising his reaction time and teamwork. With their presence, he's reminded that having comrades beside him wasn't so bad. Since they caught 3 targets right off the bat, they decide to clean up and take a quick break. Just then, Ron notices something moving near the dead harpies. A smaller creature toddled around, holding the monster's feathers. Dahlia makes fun of him for being such a bumpkin, and explains that they're called living dolls. They're basically mana-powered pet golems, and the one before him is Forco. The owner brims with pride and affection for his pet, who was cleaning the feathers. Since they run on mana, they don't need to be fed, and can even be trained to help. They aren't babies, but it becomes very evident that Dahlia is fond of cute things. Remembering something upon looking at Ron, he clutches Forco and turns away, reminding the human that he's a golem that can't be eaten. Marin ends the nonsensical conversation to get back to hunting. They reach half of their quota much faster than one normally would. Given the newbie's skills, the leader wonders why Dahlia took so long before introducing him. As he starts to talk about certain circumstances, the amazing smell of roasting chicken hit the beast woman's sensitive nose. The elf already had an idea of what was happening, but Marin just got mad, believing the human was roasting meat for himself. Harpy meat was prepped for cooking, and the cauldron was heated up. Everything was seasoned perfectly to his taste, and all that's left was to cook. Oil sizzled as he placed cutlets on the pan, taking care not to burn them. Soon enough, pan-seared harpy shoulder was plated to eat. It looks exactly like chicken, but what's important is ultimately the taste. A single bite tells Ron all he needs to know. The texture is like foal as well, but way more delicious and flavorful. There was no gaminess, just sweetness and fat melting in his mouth. While planning the next time, his shocked comrades order him to stop right away. Sitting beside the harpy carcass, he apologizes and asks if they want to have a bite. Marin collapses upon witnessing the most horrifying thing she's ever seen in her life. Ron argues that the harpy's face is closer to a fish instead of a human. But that's not the point. Dahlia starts to lose focus from experiencing this a second time, but the delectable scent hits the beastman's nose again, and she can't help, even just for a second, to consider it. She shakes her head, reminding herself that it's a monster. The thought of eating it alone was blasphemous, but Ron notices her expression and offers them a bite. While Dahlia was against it completely, Marin just stared, nearly drooling as the human vouched for its flavor. The temptation makes her scream in agony, and she questions why monster meat smelled so good. Remembering the braised harpy meat, Ron opens the pot that was left for a bit longer than he intended to. The end result is a tender harpy leg. He doesn't mind the girl's questions, sharing that he's always wanted to try unseasoned feet. With this, he takes a bite out of the huge appendage. Since he braised it slowly, the meat is soft and sweet as pudding, and it even stays together due to the collagen. It would be better with a spicy sauce, so he decides to try that out at home with the remaining leg. Dahlia, who was exasperated and only now turned to look at him again, screams in shock upon seeing the new part in his hand. As soon as he says that harpy legs have poison, Ron dropped to the floor. Marin is told to use status recovery magic on him, but she doesn't know how to. It's basic magic for priests, which she never bothered to learn as it was a hassle. With Dahlia making a scene, other harpies respond and fly towards them. Instead of using support magic, the priest proudly uses a new fire spell she learned. A raging torrent of magma is shot out of her palm, missing the enemy but torching Forco. The owner of the golem shook in horror, not even having the golem for a week. Although the team was in chaos, the flames fortunately drove the enemy away. Dahlia grabs his leader's collar in a rage, but she just apologizes in embarrassment. His anger was enough to last for millennia, and while she offers to buy him a replacement, it wasn't going to be enough, especially since Forco is a limited edition golem that's no longer in sale. After a long while, they return to the guild, where Daisy confirms the success of their mission. She tells them to personally dispose of the meat that came from the harpy corpses. They sigh in exhaustion, as the entire day was nothing but mentally tiring. Ron was about to leave when they saw him take the bag of harpy legs. He's bringing it back to eat, since it'd be a waste not to after butchering the meat. Since the way he's carrying it was bothersome, he's told to at least put it in his storage. Only now does he remember that he has something like that. He opens the skill he completely forgot about and sees a few items and several open spaces. The reason people have been looking at him funny is because he carried huge luggage all the time, wondering how long he's forgotten something so basic. He curses his mental state. His thoughts are interrupted by Marin's voice. The last part of their mission was rough, but their skills and teamwork were top-notch. If he's up to it, then he can officially join their party and breeze through missions. Ron's acceptance would formally place him in the misanthropic party. Since they both have great skills, having them as allies was definitely better than being alone. He accepts the invitation, which makes Marin smile in delight and surprise. Running off alone to formally register their party, she leaves the two men alone. A lot happened between them already, but since they're comrades from that moment onward, Dahlia tells Ron that he'll be counting on him for the rest of his short lifespan. The words remind him of his old party leader, who said the same thing. Although the memory is bittersweet, he returns the gesture after a moment of silence. Marin returns after some time, waving the registration documents of their party. Holding it to their face, she shares how she proudly named them the Messed Up Party, a strikingly bad name. Complaints pour in, mainly from the elf, but the leader immediately abuses her power. She says she heard Ron mention it earlier in the harpy nest. He called the situation messed up, and she just really liked the word despite not knowing what it means exactly. Dahlia insists on the principle of naming together, but she counters with following the leader's decision. He can't believe that all their achievements will now be listed under such a ridiculous name. On the other hand, Ron didn't mind it much, and just wanted to eat harpy meat in his room. Marin catches him and asks where he's going. Since he's new, they have to hold a welcome party, which doubles as a celebration for the mission. He tries to decline, but the leader won't allow it and tells both men to join. They arrive at a nearby tavern by nightfall, and are told to drink as much as they want. Dahlia was still in denial over their name, and was scolded for holding a grudge like a typical elf. Meanwhile, Ron was looking at the delicious-looking food that was sure to taste subpar. That said, the visuals alone made him salivate and consider just one bite. He does just that, but feels sick from the awful and hot newspaper-like taste. Moving on from their argument, Marin says she has something to ask of their new member. They have to talk about their goal, which is to become an A-rank party as soon as possible. The reason for this will remain private, as they each have their own circumstances. Adventurers all start at D rank, and can rise higher through various promotion examinations. However, the highest rank an adventurer can reach through these exams is limited to B. To reach A rank, one must be recognized for their achievements and be qualified to take a mysterious examination. It is a feat that only the elites recognized by the guild can attain. As for Marin, her younger brothers are slaves, so she needs a huge amount of money to free them. Her old master agreed to free her for 3 years, to allow her to earn enough to buy their freedom. Their family was enslaved after the revolution, so this is the only way to save them. Ron has no idea what revolution she's talking about, which shocks the two. By human standards, it's something that happened fairly recently, and is common history. Humans have been kidnapping and trafficking other races for centuries. They captured elves for their beauty, forced dwarves to work for their technical skills, and enslaved beastmen who they viewed as lowly animals. Their families were among those. Humans locked their brethren without escape, and exploited them for their own desires. In prisons they couldn't escape from, they wasted away in both mind and body. Those who tried to escape and were caught all met terrible ends. This continued for ages, and so the races that lived separately eventually united to stand against tyranny. It was the beginning of the revolution, which the humans labeled as the race war. Several demands were presented to humans, one of which was the abolition of slavery. If they didn't accept the terms, then an all-out war would have been launched against them. Humanity took a hardline stance at first, but unlike the non-humans, they had too much to lose. They signed a treaty in the end, making the trafficking of other races illegal, with provisions to prevent them from interfering with their lives. After that, their hidden brethren began showing, and now it's natural to see them walking in plain sight. It's because of that treaty that the elf and beastmen can work as adventurers. Ron had no idea that such a piece of history existed. He then asks about Dahlia's side of the story. He wants to become the elder of the forest where he used to live. His family has taken on the role for generations, and that was set to continue. However, that role is forced onto the eldest child, and while his older sister hates the idea, everyone is forcing the responsibility onto her hands. He's more confident than anyone that he can protect his family. After hearing his plea, his brethren agreed to hand him the seat if he proves himself before he turns 150. Just becoming an A ranker won't be enough, but it'll be a necessary step for the end goal. From slavery to becoming an elder, they both have desperate reasons. Since each of them carry their own desires, it'd be great if Ron has a similar objective. He's asked if he has anything of the sort. He thinks about it for a while, and remembers the sister's grave site. Seeing his reaction, they say it's okay if he doesn't want to talk about it. Perhaps it was for this very purpose. Filled with newfound resolve, the human states that there's a dragon he wants to kill. The two are surprised by the unexpected mention of an all-powerful creature. Ron says he's hunting the one who attacked and burned his home years ago. Once he meets that dragon, there's something he must do at all costs. The table is silent for a while, and he already knows that they think he's joking. Instead of mocking him, Dahlia says he looked like he had no greed, but actually holds the biggest ambition out of all of them. Regardless of the specifics, his goal is to rank up to receive the rights for dragon subjugation. Since they all share the same objective, the party clinks their mugs and agrees to do their best. The new day comes, and Ron decides to take it easy and cook up a hearty meal for himself. Even so, he only bought a few ingredients but was already out of cash after paying for the inn. Oil is expensive, so it's a waste, but first he heats it up. After this, he calls on his magic storage, which he just recently remembered to use. Inside is raw meat that has been perfectly preserved. It's in the same state from when it first entered, meaning the space is the best food storage. Now he beats the eggs to make a wash, then evenly coats the meat in breadcrumb batter. He drops it into the oil, and hears the familiar sizzle that never gets old. Once it's nice and golden brown, he flips the pieces to avoid burning, then fries a second time for crispiness. Finally, it was time to drain, plate, and eat the deep-fried harpy thighs. The fork goes into the golden skin, making a crackling sound. It turned out pretty well for a first try. Lifting his helmet just a tiny bit, he takes a bite and gets a taste of the ultimate combination of crispy texture and juicy meat that bursts with flavor in each bite. It was delicious. There was also a subtle sweetness unique to it, almost comparable to a crab packed with meat. The more he eats, the more he wants, and he's glad that he has a lot of it. As he was just about to take another bite, someone loudly called to him. It was Dahlia, banging on his door and telling him to open up already. He does as told and answers the door, immediately asking what he wants all of a sudden. Since he has something urgent to discuss, he says he needs some of his time, and shares that there seems to be a problem with their leader. As it's a fairly private conversation, he's brought inside, where he sees a plate of fried food. He's appalled, already knowing that his comrade used monster meat, but sits down while reminding himself that Marin comes first. Saying their mere conversation must be kept a secret from her, Dahlia asks him to lend some money. The brazen request ignites something in Ron, who stands up and tells him to leave if this is what it's all about. He vows to kick him out immediately, if he doesn't have a convincing reason. Getting to the point, the elf says Marin's human master seems to have deceived her. Given her situation with her siblings, the reason they paused their missions today was because she went out to see them. However, her master broke his promise, and was preparing to put them up for auction. He must have planned this from the start, and was just pretending to toy with her. When she begged him to stop, he told her to come up with the ransom in just 5 days. Unfortunately, he's asking for 10 gold coins per person, meaning 20 inches total. Converting this world's currency to his old standards, 1 brawn is about 10 yen, 100 is 1 silver, and 100 silver is 1 gold. The average adventurer's cost of living is 2 gold per month, and 20 gold means about 2 million yen. Dahlia didn't want to recklessly spread the story, but the prideful girl begged him to save her siblings. He can't turn a blind eye to the slavery of his brethren, so he came to ask for money. Ron flatly refuses, as he's only known them a few days despite being in a party. He doesn't have that much anyway, but regardless, he doesn't trust them enough to do that. Scratching his head, Dahlia says Marin's siblings are small children, who've barely started walking. Ron releases a deadly aura, offended by the elf who dared to blackmail him using his personal values. For now, he asks what will be in it for him, if he does agree to lend a hand one way or another. The room is still. It seems there was no other option left. Dahlia then tells the human to lend him his ear for a second, in which he asks if he possesses the wind attribute among his elemental aptitudes. In this world, as long as one possesses the intelligence stat, they can use magic from all lineages. Elemental aptitude indicates the elements one is suited for, costing less mana while giving more power. This is mainly determined at birth, and most people are born with just one type. Occasionally, there are geniuses born with 2 or more, and eventually etch their names in history. If he helps the 2 with this matter, Dahlia promises to grant him the spirit's blessing, which provides aptitude for the wind element. It's not that it isn't enough, but Ron knows that granting an attribute isn't something anyone can do. Annoyed, the elf swears on the name of his forest, proving his resolve. With that said, the human accepts the terms and stands up to get going. Walking together, Dahlia asks how Ron planned to get the 20 gold, an amount he knows is huge. The human says he'll just have to poach and sell high-level monsters on the black market. He's reminded that the guild strictly forbids entering dungeons above one's rank without permission, but this is the only way to make that much money in such a short amount of time. The guild assigns ranks to quests, just like they do to adventurers, and has rules regarding them. Those caught entering dungeons above their level will be fined and suspended from taking on any work. Putting legality aside, the distance of high-level dungeons is too great and will take time. Just traveling there would take 3 to 4 days. Dahlia is asked how he planned to gather money if Ron wasn't convinced. Asking his family for help would take too long, so he was going to use the little he's saved. Unfortunately, the human has nothing of the sorts, so maybe he has something valuable he can sell. The most valuable thing he has right now are the pair of earrings inside his storage. For now, the two agree to scrape together what they can. As the sun set, a shady and hooded figure entered a building. The storekeeper sees him and questions what he wants. Told that he wants to sell something, the man asks to see it. A familiar set of earrings are placed on the table. Normally, such articles should just be sold at a jewelry store. Taking a closer look, the keeper's eyes opened in absolute shock, realizing that he was holding Pledis fragments, which should now be non-existent. Asked where he got them, Ron says an old friend entrusted him with them. At a lavish-looking manor, a familiar set of hands trembled on the floor. Watching Marin kneel before him, Clyde says she must finally understand her reality. She must have enjoyed her little outing, from his whim of giving her 3 years to earn money. The beastman wants nothing more than to rip him and his lackeys to shreds. Just then, she hears Dahlia's voice, calling to her from outside. She turns to see him, but is surprised that Ron is by his side. Asked why he's there, the elf says he helped bring the money in. They can talk about it later, but they have to go ahead and buy her siblings freedom now. Identifying themselves as her party members, they state that they've brought the ransom Clyde demanded. Marin hates that she's receiving help from a human, and worries about it being used against her later. The slaver doubts that they could bring that much money in, and gets ready to identify counterfeits. However, he's shocked to find real gold coins inside the sack they brought. One look was enough, so she told him to hurry and free her siblings already. He then plays with the terms, arguing that she had to bring the money herself. It was ridiculous, and Dahlia knew that. Furious, he recounts the covenant that deems their transaction valid, and dares him to trick an elf. Clyde hates it, but has no choice but to call for the goods and identity documents. If her friend hadn't been there, then Marin would have been at the evil man's mercy. The attendants arrive, and with them are 2 beast children. They ran into their sister's tight embrace, finally freed from slavery. Ron watched the emotional reunion between the siblings, and like Dahlia said, the man enslaved children just because they're from a different race. They were way too skinny, and the thought of them starving made him shake with fury. Taking the slaves' original identity documents, Clyde tears them apart, supposedly disposing of the papers in front of them all. Dissatisfied with it, Marin uses her elemental ability to burn the documents herself, officially freeing her siblings once and for all. The slaver scoffs at this, and reminds her that she's still his slave despite the others being freed. Just then, Ron summoned his storage again, not done with the deal just yet. He takes another pouch out and says he's buying Marin's status as well. The entire room is shocked by his actions. She insists that she can handle herself, and that saving her family was enough, but he just ignores her and asks for the price. Clyde laughs at the rather flashy attempt. He flatly declines the deal, as he's already put her up for today's auction. Since their leader is already listed, Clyde suggests participating and buying her themselves. Marin demanded an explanation, never having heard that she was even up for auction. Knowing this was done on a whim to spite them, Dahlia was enraged. The slaver just laughs at them, saying he has every right to do whatever he wants to with her. While the elf was about to lose control, Ron wasn't one to fall for his childish trickery. It's probably a lie Clyde cooked up, and likely had no intention of selling her anyway. Rolling with it, the human accepts the demand and agrees to buy her later. He tells Marin to trust him and his plan, but she just wonders why he'd go so far. Remaining silent, he remembers the sister, who told him that every child needs an adult to guide and protect them. That, of course, applied to him as well. She rubbed his head endearingly, taking that role on for him. Every child deserves a protector, and is their reason for living. Right now, he's the only one who can keep the beast children safe. Freeing them isn't the end of the game, and he wasn't willing to leave them without their sister. Convinced, Marin says she'll give it a shot and trust him, but vows to never forgive him if he talks big and loses in the end. While Dahlia doesn't like it either, he knows that all they can do now is follow Manor's lead. With this, the two men leave for now, promising to meet again soon enough. Clyde laughed at his slave's reliable pals and questions if she believes that they can actually save her. He has no plans of just auctioning and selling her off. The little girl can struggle all she wants, but there was no way he was letting her escape, and he says she'll just come crawling back to him eventually. Turning away, he tells his lackey to call the merchant support team and get ready. The auction house lights up at nighttime, and they were selling all kinds of people, including human criminals. Bidding was fairly high, and the two party members sat there, waiting for their leader. While they talked about how much a beastman costs, a shady man took a seat behind them, listening. It was finally time to move on to a different race. They perk up as Marin is presented to the crowd. Her skills and experiences are highlighted, but her eyes were full of nothing but anger. Clyde definitely pulled some dirty trick, and she had to tell her members somehow. While her introduction continued, her master watched from above with a big grin on his face. He's sure that the C-rankers already blew their cash by paying for her siblings. It was simply ridiculous for them to think that they could buy his treasure. There was no way he's going to let them have their way. The host starts the bid at 6 gold and 30 silver pieces. The man behind the adventures immediately raises his paddle and is asked for his bid. He stood up, ready to wash everyone away. Dahlia is incredulous as he bids 20 gold right off the bat. It was an amount that was enough to make Marin's heart drop, and she's certain that they can't possibly have more than that. The elf was losing it, expecting something just a bit over the average 9 gold. Just then, another number rose and asked what the bid limit was. While humans are capped at 30, other races are at a higher value of 50 gold. In that case, Ron bluntly bids 50 gold to secure his leader's sale. Dahlia can't believe it, not expecting him to have so much money on hand. He's fully prepared for this, not having trusted her master in the first place. Even the host doubted his ears and asked him to repeat the bid. Based on their shabby appearance alone, he believed that they can't possibly pay that, and the entire room agreed. Trying to catch him, he says the auction house has an immediate payment policy. With that said, Ron turned to his side, leaving his seat and heading toward the stage despite the host's disapproval. He stood over Marin, shining with a light as he brought salvation into her life. Just then, gold coins rained down from above as he opened his magic storage. After a while, he asks if he's shown them enough. Clyde wanted to protest, not understanding how a mere C-rank adventurer could have so much. Not having a choice but to accept, the host seals the deal, and the sweet words of freedom struck the chains binding Marin's heart. Back in their inn, her siblings ran to her with huge smiles on their faces. She hugs both of them tightly, saying it's all over, and that everyone was finally free. Asked why he kept his wealth a secret, Ron says they simply never asked how much he had. Looking at the family's reunion, they're just glad that things worked out in the end. Calling to the human, Marin bashfully but sincerely thanks him, and says she has no idea how to repay him. They can't continue their conversation, as a delicious scent reaches the children's noses. Told that they smell delicious meat, Ron leads them into the kitchen for a bite. Meanwhile, the big sister wonders how to repay him, and is told not to worry about it too much. Her savior probably helped because he sees them as comrades, and will just want to keep things that way. Reassured, Marin moves on and says she smelled something greasy and delicious. Dahlia realizes something upon hearing her words, and falls into immediate panic. He enters the dining room to stop Ron, who was about to serve the children fried harpy meat. Dahlia rushes to the kitchen and angrily stops Ron from feeding Marin's siblings monster meat, prompting him to ask the elf what is the matter. The young beasts take a bite of the fried harpy, finding it the most delicious thing they ever tasted. Dahlia expresses his disgust, but Marin tells him that his siblings can eat fried chicken as beasts can have guts of steel. He adds that they are growing kids, so they can eat whatever they want unless it's iron or monster, until Marin realizes something and asks what kind of meat they are eating, which Ron immediately replies that it is a harpy meat. The young beasts enjoy the meat happily, while Marin can't believe what Ron is feeding her siblings. She instantly grabs the meat and tells her siblings to stop eating it, but the kids beg her and express how delicious the food is. Marin suddenly looks at the food, thinking of pretending to pass out after eating it to scare her siblings. She notes that she'd rather die than eat a gross monster, but she doesn't have any choice. While shaking, she tries not to taste it and just drops like she is poisoned. Suddenly, her eyes widen in shock, prompting Dahlia to ask her what is wrong. The elf thinks that she just got poisoned like Ron did when he ate gargoyles. To her surprise, Marin can't believe how delicious the monster meat is while her siblings think she is hogging the food. Marin notes that she has never had meat this tender, juicy, and savory. Suddenly, Ron asks her if she likes the taste, which startles her. Marin pretends she did not like the monster meat as she takes her siblings away while feeling embarrassed. Suddenly, Ron calls Dahlia, reminding him about the gold coin he owes him and requests that he hands over 90% of his earnings to him, which stuns him. His frustration displays and asks if he wants him to die, but Ron responds with a cold heart. He proceeds and asks for the reward that Dahlia promised. Shortly, the two come out to the woods in the middle of the night. Dahlia explains that they have to be discreet as the spirits don't like the kind of atmosphere as he prepares to grant Ron an attribute blessing. Dahlia notices that Ron is aware that it is not a common feat and asks him to take off his gloves as bare skin is needed for the blessing to take hold. Ron follows his instructions, while Dahlia reveals that elves conceived within the forest are born with a spirit's blessing. The blessing's attribute determines their innate aptitude, and that bonded spirit stays with them for life like a guardian. By asking that spirit, one can grant a spirit's blessing to another. However, elves can only do it once, and they usually exchange blessings with a partner, or give it to a child or lifelong savior. Ron did not realize it was such a huge deal and questions if he is sure to use it on him. Dahlia declares him as his savior, fulfilling his wish to save his kin from human oppression twice. He proceeds with the ritual and calls upon a spirit named Sylph. Ron is astonished by the gust of wind surrounding him, wondering if he is feeling the spirit's power already. Dahlia reveals that humans didn't just kidnap elves for their beauty. Instead, they used freedom from pain as bait to steal this blessing. Most of his kin endured hell to protect their dignity, but after the treaty freed the slaves, the elf mortality rate spiked, revealing that the cause was always harming themselves. Ron is rendered speechless. Dahlia explains that elves have annoyingly sharp memories, leaving those who returned after the treaty haunted by their own trauma when they made their way back to the World Tree. Dahlia shares that he despises the humans who caused and ignored their suffering, enough that he'd kill them all if he could. Dahlia exhales magically, blowing a spiritual gust towards Ron. He finally acquires the wind attribute affinity on top of fire, stunning Ron. Dahlia clarifies that he still hates humans for their vile and greedy nature, adding that just because he gave him a blessing doesn't mean he has forgiven humans, while Ron listens to him intently. The next day at the guild, Marin and Dahlia greet Ron. They share that they finally found another beast to babysit Amorta's siblings, since they can't just leave them to humans. Marin is excited as this is her first day as a free citizen, and she also picked up a great quest, which is to subjugate Mad Dorth. Dahlia finds it disgusting to hunt in a muddy swamp, but Marin explains that it is safe for a C-rank quest. Since Mad Dorth are living mud lump that moves like a slime, Ron wonders if they taste good like other monsters. Dahlia already knows what he is thinking, while Marin tells them to go to the entrance to meet the carriage she rented. As they walk, Marin plans to explain the details inside the carriage after Dahlia asks her if she checked the other monsters in the crystal cave. Marin then shares that she needs to find a place for her and her siblings, since she can't let them live in an inn for so long. The group suddenly pauses before the carriage. Dahlia finds their ride a bit expensive, but Marin explains that it isn't the one she requested. She asks the armored guard to explain, until a blonde guy comes out of the luxurious carriage, sending chills down Marin's spine after hearing the familiar voice. It turns out that it was her former master, prompting Ron to ask what he wants since the deal was already done. The master arrogantly replies that he misses Marin, so he decides to make a proposal instead, offering to trade the slave back as she refers to Marin. The proposal renders Ron speechless. This angers Dahlia and finds the renegotiation absurd, but the master tells the elf to shut up and asks Marin to stop glaring at him for old time's sake. He warns them that the rear guards are over 80 and will subdue them if they retaliate. The master addresses Ron politely and offers 100 gold coins to get Marin back, but Ron simply refuses, rendering the master speechless. He thinks that Ron finds the offer too small, but the slave is not worth more than 100 golds, which only angers Dahlia. He raises the offer to 150, but Ron coldly refuses. He ups it again, only to get the same response. Marin is confident that Ron will not trade her even if he offers 100 million gold coins. The master reveals that the market price for a beastman slave is 200 gold coins and asks if he will still refuse. Ron thinks it is a good deal, which angers Dahlia, but he says he is only joking. Ron reminds the master that Marin is already a free person after he destroyed her contract before. He gives the master a warning to stop bothering them and disrespecting Marin. The master expresses his frustration as he notes that they are getting drunk on their sense of camaraderie. He thought he could settle things with money, but he will not give up the pleasure of toying with Marin, but a sudden blow slams into his face. Turns out that Marin could not hold back anymore and decided to hit her former master. Her energy surges as she reminds him that she is no longer his slave and tells him to be careful about his language. The armored guard reacts at once as he reaches for his sword, but Ron grabs his head and warns him not to draw his weapon. He suddenly crushes his face into the ground without hesitation, while the other mercenary steps in with his spear. Ron calmly picks up a rock and hurls it with overwhelming force. The enemy did not have time to react, while the master expresses his frustration after his guards are taken down easily. He He questions what Ron's level is, to which the latter reveals that it is 95, shocking Marin and Dahlia. Suddenly, Marin grabs her former master's head to give him a hard beating. Dahlia tells Marin to wrap it up so they can go, while the latter responds that she just finished beating up his former master. She warns him never to show up his face again, but the master plans his revenge immediately by letting the group of merchants know about their group. Ron approaches the master and tells him that rumors about him killing people have made it hard for him to find a party. He notes that it is a bigger hassle to find a new party than to crush one merchant group, scaring the master. Ron warns him not to lay a hand on his party, then he lifts his foot and crushes his carriage with one simple kick. The master is rendered speechless as Ron walks away after telling him to know his place. Meanwhile, inside the crystal cave, Dahlia points out that the monsters are weak to fire and asks to light one. Marin has an idea, but Dahlia tries to stop her immediately. Marin blasts the cave with her flames, but Dahlia scolds her to at least practice her magic if she is going to use it next time. Afterwards, Ron prepares a muddy-like soup made out of the monster. Marin and Dahlia warn him to be careful since they don't know if it's poisonous. Ron is surprised that the food doesn't smell like earth, so he thinks it doesn't taste like one too. However, he feels disgusted as he describes the taste as like clay. He decides to eat the rest of the harpy carriage that he prepared before. Suddenly, Marin formally thanks him for saving her family and promises to save up money to pay him. He tells her that there is no need to pay him back since she needs to feed her brothers, until Dahlia suddenly asks him how he managed to get a lot of money. Ron reveals that he sold a keepsake from an old friend, rendering Marin speechless. She clenches her fist and asks why he had to sell such an important item. Ron reassures her that it is fine, noting that they are his friends now and she can repay him by accomplishing requests together as a party. Marin can't believe his generosity, while Dahlia notes that it is nice to have her as their leader. Marin's spirits are lifted and promises to take care of them, until she suddenly recalls Dahlia bestowing Ron a blessing and asks if they have known each other from before. He responds that it's not much different from how long he's known Marin and notes that the blessing was the price he had to pay for a contract. This sparks curiosity in Marin and asks Ron why he always wears a lid. He notes that he has his own reasons, while Marin gets curious and wants to take it off. Dahlia assumes that Ron is hiding a massive scar and reminds Marin not to pry too much. However, the elf reminds Ron to open up just a little bit in case someone wants to get to know him more, rendering him speechless. Suddenly, something catches his attention. A massive explosion follows, shocking Dahlia and Marin. A crystal tail suddenly appears, but an arrow pierces its eye, while Marin delivers the finishing blow without hesitation. She asks if Ron is okay, but shock fills Dahlia's face after he checks him out. It turns out that there are crystals shards in Ron's eyes after the explosion. He notes that his vision is fine and downplays his wounds, but his colleagues think otherwise. Marin worriedly asks him to take off his helmet so they can treat his wounds, and if his eyes are hurt, they need to return to the temple at once. Suddenly, a memory hits him, showing his former colleagues fleeing in terror after seeing what they thought was a monster. Ron screams and orders Dahlia and Marin not to touch him, stunning the two girls as he doesn't really want them to see his face. Ron buries his face in his hands, as if he's in a nightmare, and tells them to stop and look away. Dahlia tries to calm him down and explains that they need to properly check his injury before they can treat it. Ron finally collects himself and reassures them that it's just a graze and his eyesight is normal. Dahlia is stunned when Ron reminds him his level and compares it to Crystal Tail, that is only level 30. He reiterates that he is fine and suggests that they continue the subjugation. The girls look at each other in silence, then Marin proceeds to heal him and the two respect his wish. The girls apologize and Ron does the same after screaming at them. The group finally returns to the guild after finishing their subjugation request. The receptionist notices awkwardness among them and asks if something happened while Marin tries to act normal. Suddenly, she checks on Ron again and asks if he is really not going to the temple. Dahlia suggests that they rest while keeping an eye on Ron's condition. Suddenly, an adventurer rushes through the entrance and calls for an emergency until someone approaches and asks what is wrong. She reports that a new open-type dungeon has been confirmed on the border of Adorama, revealing that it is called the Dryad's Flower Garden. This catches Ron's attention, while Marin suggests that they return to the inn first, since the guild will take care of it. However, Ron insists that they join the subjugation, shocking Dahlia and Marin. He confirms and shares that there's something he's been thinking about. Meanwhile, in the dense forest of Adorama, Anchorman, the first hero, assembles the parties summoned by the guild for a briefing. Adventurers talk about how the first person to find the dungeon got beaten up badly by the boss. Meanwhile, Ron notes that the Dryads are pant-type monsters, thinking if they can make a good salad or pickles. Dahlia and Marin ask Ron to be discreet about his eating habits around other parties or their reputation will be done for. Ron excitedly tells Dahlia that he can finally make a dish for him since elves are vegetarian, but he refuses his offer instantly. The adventurers learn that there are a total of 2 bosses confirmed in the dungeon, making it tough for them with their current number. However, Anchorman, the first hero, tells them not to worry since he is with them. The subjugation will be a safe operation. Dahlia notices that Ron is unfamiliar with a hero and can't believe that he is more informed than him despite growing up in the forest. He explains that hero is a collective term for those holding the title, and people treat them with utmost respect. However, there are some who are terrified by the hero's appearance, revealing that it foretells the resurrection of the king of all monsters, the Demon King. When the time comes, the heroes who stand against the Demon King will be useful. That is why heroes are always given special treatment by nations and guilds. With the help of appraisal, it is revealed that Anchorman is a level 75 warrior class with top of the class stats. It is also shown that he has so many breaker titles for first-time dungeon clears. Ron shares that he saw a hero once a long time ago, while Dahlia notes that it is not surprising since out of the 5 heroes found so far, the second one was killed, and the 4th hero was taken out by a monster, so there are only 3 left. Ron's attention suddenly shifts, seeing a swarm of monsters coming in to attack. The adventurers hold them back so they don't reach the main unit, prompting Dahlia to prepare and shoot them with his precise shots. Marin joins the fight as she punches the monsters to death, while Ron showcases his swordsmanship as he slashes the swarm. The adventurers are astonished by Ron's party and thought that they were unreliable at first after hearing the name of their party. Marin overhears the adventurers, proud that their name is spreading, but Dahlia tells her that it is not a compliment. The elf explains that the hero and B-rank party will take down the 2 bosses one by one, while their role is to block the other monsters approaching them. Finally, one of the dryads has appeared, but the B-rank party is already struggling to keep up with the boss. They try to keep the boss occupied until the Anchorman defeats the other dryad. Anchorman charges forward and dodges the dryad's attack effortlessly, wondering if he should finish the monster off instantly. The boss is unable to react in time, until Anchorman slashes the monster into pieces in a flash. The adventurers are astonished by the hero's performance after defeating the boss all by himself, while Anchorman smiles as he displays humility. Suddenly, the other dryad mourns for the loss of its kin as it lets out a guttural scream. The adventurer is bothered by the monster's behavior, but the other doesn't care and hopes that the hero finishes the remaining boss. The earth suddenly cracks as the dryad summons roots as it continues to scream. The adventurers are tied by the roots and unable to let go, prompting Ron to panic as he realizes that the open dungeon has multiple bosses and finally makes his conclusion. He realizes that they need to defeat both bosses simultaneously. Tyrone, master of the enraged garden, is deeply saddened by the loss of her companion. Dahlia asks Ron what is up with the monster, but he warns her not to get too close to the high-level boss. Anchorman orders everyone to retreat as the monster is level 70 and it is out of their league. He tries to buy them some time as the others get back. However, the adventurers are caught by the vines and ask for help. Silently, Anchorman complains that low levels are such a pain. It is revealed that Anchorman already met up with the Thieves Guild before to gather some intel, which included the strategy to kill the bosses at once. He lied and only fed them with a partial info while he blamed them for trusting him blindly. He finally prepares to make a move and delivers the finishing blow like a true hero. Suddenly, he is affected by the monster's curse, which disables him to use skills or weapon arts for 10 minutes. The monster's sinister aura looms in the atmosphere, while Anchorman panics for not hearing about the curse skill from his intel. The monster drags him with its vine and slams him on the ground. His frustration displays as he plans to cut the vine to set himself free. However, the monster doesn't give him a chance as it slams him again violently. Anchorman almost loses his consciousness, while the adventurers continue to retreat after seeing the hero is down and calls the strategy a failure. Ron notes that the casualties will be massive if the situation keeps up. The monster chases after the adventurers, while Ron wonders how long he should hold back as he uses his sword art, thinking that a moderate level should be enough. In a flash, Ron dashes between the monster and the adventurers and delivers a powerful slash which cuts the monster in half. The adventurer is stunned after he defeats a level 70 boss with ease. Ron is not expecting an area-wide effect, not meaning to make the attack very dramatic. A system suddenly appears before him, revealing that he just acquired a title called Conqueror of the Dryad's Garden. Dahlia and Marin suddenly rush to check on Ron, their proud look displayed for their colleague. The other adventurers approach Ron and thank him for saving them, while their praises continue. Suddenly, one of them realizes that Ron is the one from the rumors who eats monsters and wonders if he is not dangerous. Dahlia and Marin don't like the tone of their voices, prompting them to call out their rude behaviors after Ron just saved their lives. The girls order them to get lost before things go bad. Meanwhile, in the other corner, The adventurers help Anchorman to get up, but the hero is pissed off at Ron for snatching his title as the Dungeon Conqueror. He looks at Ron and promises not to forget this embarrassment. Back at the inn, Ron starts to get the work done on the table, noting that the insides are finally out. He describes that they are raw but smooth and glossy. He notes that they were lucky to run into an ant on the way back, curious to know what the chestnuts harvested from it would taste like. First, he peels the hard outer shell, then removes the thin inner skin by hand. He parboils them next in hot water until half cooked. He suggests taking them out early so they don't get mushy. While they boil, he mixes water and sugar in another pot. Ron boils it down in high heat to make syrup until he is satisfied with how it looks. He then simmers and coats them evenly, spooning the syrup over. Once the food looks good, it's time to close the lid. The sauce sinks into the chestnuts as they cool, so he lets them chill thoroughly, waiting for them to cool slowly in the pot. He repeats the process 3 times before finally reaching the last step. The food is finally complete, while he admires the glossy sugar coating and its perfect bite-sized shape, then wonders how a monster's fruit will taste. As he takes the first bite, he can't believe what he tastes. The syrup layers sealed in the chestnut sweetness, creating a deep, rich flavor. The chestnut absorbed the syrup and simmered until soft and chewy. He describes it as an emotional taste like high-end food, and he can't just eat something this good alone. Ron comes to Dahlia, who wonders about the noise he heard and realizes that Ron is eating monsters again. The latter explains that it is a nut, so even vegetarians can eat it, but Dahlia explains that it's not the case and asks about Marin instead. It turns out that she doesn't like sweets and her siblings are already sleeping, so he can't give them any. Ron asks if Dahlia doesn't really want to eat it, but he recoils with disgust. The elf finally gives in since Ron is begging for it. After taking his first bite, Dahlia's eyes widened in shock. He can't believe that it's a monster's fruit since it's so sweet and soft, while the aromatic syrup matches the chewy texture perfectly. Ron asks if it's good, but Dahlia is too embarrassed to admit it. Dahlia finally shares that it is packed with the rich taste of autumn and asks what is the dish called, which Ron names after himself. Dahlia can't believe that he would name a snack after himself, but Ron explains that it's the other way around. Then he points out that the elf likes sweets. He explains that his master taught him to suppress his appetite but doesn't deny that he has a sweet tooth. Ron describes his master as strict, but Dahlia explains that she is just a serious person. Dahlia reveals that she is still the captain of the guard in his hometown forest, revealing that her name is Rose. Suddenly, Ron grabs Dahlia's hand, until he starts describing her to have pink hair, a spear user and water attribute, while Dahlia is shocked that he knows all of this. Ron immediately asks Dahlia to head to his hometown tomorrow, implying that he knows his master. The next day, Rose is shocked to see Ron. She recognizes his build and voice, but questions why he doesn't look like an old man after 100 years. Ron reminds her that he was about 15 when they first met, revealing that Wizard Best Friend was the Magic Tower's youngest exec, who loved Madeleines, but he couldn't stomach the ones she baked. He also reminds her that she had a mountain of fan letters from mercenaries. Rose stops him as he makes his point that he is legit, until she pauses for a moment. She silently points out his innocent tone, which contrasts his quiet vibe, but she still can't believe how it is possible. Ron reveals that he has his reasons, while Rose asks him to show his hand. She finds it strange that he hasn't changed a bit while she lived through the years. She asks if Carlo is still alive and young like him, but Ron replies that he's dead already. She pauses for a second while Ron continues that he is the only survivor. Rose understands his situation since it has been 100 years, and no way humans would still be alive. She assumes that they were all dead, but Ron softly utters Rose's name. He reminds her about the rare item he got when they formed their party for the last time. The item came from the Spider Queen, Regina Aranea, which is the Arachnophobia skill book. Rose remembers the item as she was the only appraiser that identified it for him. Ron clenches his fist and reveals that the item was the reason why he is still alive, and the reason he left his friends to die. In a flashback, a horde of monsters attacked Ron, but he managed to counter them. Carlos, his teammate, questioned what those monsters were when they only came for goblins. Their leader told them to calm down and ordered Ron to hold the front line. He successfully blocked the monsters with his massive shield, while the archer prepared to strike. Rain of arrows showered down the monsters, while the leader signaled Carlos. He confirmed that he was ready. Then he unleashed his fiery magic. The leader asked if Ron ever saw goblins like they encountered, but he said he never saw them. Their friends were angry at their client for not informing them about the danger of the quest, but Demian, their healer, told them to stay positive since they could just demand hazard pay later. Carlos told him it wasn't a joke and insisted that they should grab a corpse as proof and report that the intel was wrong. Suddenly, someone noted how cruel the scene was, which shocked Carlos. A woman covered in hood arrived and expressed her disappointment after she spent ages making the monsters. They asked who she was, since the area was restricted for a subjugation request. The leader called Ron, and he immediately came in position to protect his party. The leader revealed that they were official adventurers on a request, and the forest was off limits, so she asked her to identify herself. The woman recognized them as humans who trashed her test subjects. The adventurers recoiled after realizing that the woman was out of their league. The woman shared that she was in the middle of a sacred ritual, complaining how dare they interrupt her while the gold dragon revealed herself and her scaly figure. Ron recognized something was wrong, so he decided to use appraisal, but everything was missing except her race, which was a dragon. He caught the monster's attention and immediately slammed Ron into the air. The leader was stunned after he crashed into the ground, leaving him unconscious. The gold dragon called Ron out for his rudeness and decided to use all of them as special sacrifices for her ritual. The leader alarmed everyone to get into their battle stations and asked Demian to heal Ron. The gold dragon realized she did not introduce herself because she was in a rush, so she revealed her identity, the pinnacle of draconic intellect. The adventurers panicked while they tried to keep their focus on her since she was unpredictable. Carlos noted that she took out Ron in one hit, thinking they needed to escape, so he decided to blind her with his magic first. Suddenly, a sharp object pierced her stomach in a flash, but the dragon mocked him for using magic. The archer immediately focused her aim, but she was also eliminated immediately. The leader could not see or hear the dragon's movements. Shocked at how strong their opponent was, she was losing hope and did not know what to do. Good thing her team was still barely hanging on. She relied on Demian's wide area heal to save everyone, but she needed to buy some time while he was healing Ron. The leader asked what a dragon like her was doing in a forest like this, until the dragon revealed that she wanted the resurrection of the Demon King. As the possessor of all wisdom, she had a revelation. She planned to purify the world from the plague known as humanity, and they must be wiped out. However, there was one who realized this before her, one who dedicated his life to fighting humanity, which she revealed to be the Demon King. The dragon revealed that she was preparing a sacred ritual for his resurrection to grant his wish for revenge, until the Demon King stole her heart in the process, and she planned to be his queen when he returned. She was proud of herself for falling in love with the Demon King, calling herself as the love-crazed Mad Dragon Salvator. Demian noted that she totally lost it, but her rambling bought them some time. His wide area healing preparation was almost done, and once it popped, he was going to grab everyone to escape. However, the dragon mocked them and revealed how she planned to use them as new test subjects while he killed Demian and the others. Ron admitted that they couldn't win a head-on fight and they were going to get wiped out. However, if he played the move he'd been saving, he might be able to slip in an opening. Left with no other choice, he unleashed the power of arachnophobia, then the assimilation debuff was activated.